Coming up on episode 106 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Niners Rams preview coming up for Thursday night. Niners are going to be missing a lot of dudes. Ben's going to break down what that means going into this matchup and how much confidence does he have in the Niner gang going into this matchup down in Levi's South. And then we pivot on over to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles might just be the most hilarious team in the NFL, man. We talk about the weirdness, the inconsistency. Is this team, a loss away from being back to the collapse? We'll see. But we give our takes on all the drama surrounding the Philadelphia Eagles before we preview their matchup with the Broncos this week. With that being said, y'all, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet. Rhett's Ben, my brother. How you holding up?
I've been better. I've been worse. I'm here, and I'm ready to talk some football.
Yes, sir. All right, so let's get into it. Guys, like you heard in the intro, we got a lot of juicy stuff to break down as usual. Now, this is going to be, a little bit introspective. There's a lot of deep thoughts we need to get into this week because both of our teams have some very tough scenarios that we need to work out. So let's go to the Bay because the Niners play on Thursday. But before we get into the Thursday night matchup with the Rams, let's talk about what happened last week with the Jaguars. The Niners took an unfortunate loss, 26-21 at home in what was a very close game. And watching it back on my end of things, it really felt like just missed opportunities, couple dumb plays here and there, questionable calls, not just one drop, but like six. And I'm like, if like half of those bad things, swung in your favor, it really just would have felt like you guys would have won by 10 in this game. So I could imagine your frustration with some of the things that happened in this game. So, for me, it was, I didn't feel any worse about the Niners going in, after this game. Obviously, what we're going to be talking about, injury luck wise, definitely isn't a good place to be. And I guess that's kind of where we want to, should take this into because, Brock Purdy had 3 turnovers in this game. We can argue how many, that interception, that dropped interception by McCaffrey, the tip drill one, that was just out of reach. And you can watch when Purdy's running, the toe was clearly, he was running differently. He wasn't planting the same way. And I think his throws were kind of sailing on him because of it. Do you think that now watching it, do you think that it was the best decision for the Niners to play Purdy in that last game?
No, I don't. But I think they were kind of trapped in a lot of ways. You have Mac Jones, who was struggling with that knee injury that had, reflared up since the preseason. And Purdy had the toe thing, had the shoulder thing. The shoulder thing got a lot better as the week progressed. The toe thing kind of got what was described as better. And I think a lot of the feeling was, you look at the next 4 weeks for the 49ers, and it's a tougher part of your schedule. And so given where you were at, you were 3-0, you knew what was coming up. You wanted to try and get this last one before you hit, what you can be considered like a baby gauntlet in a lot of ways. And so I think what they wanted was just to throw their best quarterback, who's the healthiest, at the game. You weren't going to throw a Tanner Mordecai in there and win the ball game, So from that standpoint, I kind of get it. But from a standpoint of long-term availability at the most important position on a football team, probably not the best move.
So I guess my next question would be, because, obviously just a little, preface, Purdy is going to be out on Thursday. He's going to be out now. Are you concerned with Purdy long term? Obviously, he has the contract, so that's not like the problem. I'm saying that he's been dealing with injuries, what seems like now on and off for almost like the past calendar year. So how concerned are you in terms of Brock's long-term health throughout the duration of this contract?
I'm not super concerned. The part that concerns me is we've talked about how badly this Niners team needs to address that offensive line. A lot of the reason why Brock Purdy is getting injured has a lot to do with his offensive line. He's not a fragile player. He's gotten hit tremendously hard throughout his career because his offensive line just hasn't done enough. So from that standpoint, I'm not worried that Brock Purdy is just a fragile man made of glass, right? But what I am worried about is, are the 49ers doing enough as a ball club to take care of Brock Purdy long term? And that's the part of it that I get a little bit concerned, because you see it now so many times, Purdy rolling out of the pocket, running for his life, and then, making this crazy run crazy throw on the run, and then, getting tackled at the end of it, or like the toe injury, getting tackled, going out of bounds, escaping a pass rush that the 49ers had no answer for. So am I worried about Brock long term? No, not him as a player. But if the 49ers do nothing to address this offensive line in the next year, I'm going to start to be a little more worried. Absolutely.
Okay, then. So let's talk a little bit more just about some of the things that I thought stood out in the Jags game before moving on here to the Rams. I thought, because the Jaguars defense has been proving so far to be one of the better defenses in the NFL this year. I thought you guys played pretty well. Again, missed opportunities, drops, drive killers. But on the other side of the ball, I thought, first game without Bosa, we knew was going to be an adventure, was going to be a challenge. And I think this Jags offense was a great team to kind of get that experience against. I think we saw on the ground the struggles that, may loom against a team that operates better in the run. And we might talk about that in this potential matchup. But I think that you guys were, again, in it. I think if, that Upton Stout penalty doesn't get called, which was kind of ticky-tack, if Fred Warner catches one of those two that are kind of just floating around him, I think people are viewing the Niners' defensive performance a lot better. I mean, the Niners' defense overall is still only allowing, it was like 22 points a game or 21 points a game.
Yeah.
Like, that's a really solid, group for the third youngest, defense in the NFL, dealing with injuries and kind of guys coming in and out and losing your third, your best player on the defensive side of the ball. So, I want your take on the defensive leader of that team. I know you mentioned it. You brought it up on the post-game pod. Go check it out in the feed if you haven't already. But the post-game interaction heard around the world with Robert Saleh and Liam Cohen, I thought was hilarious. And I thought it was great timing by Liam to, wait for his nice, big, thick offensive lineman or defensive lineman to kind of be in the way before saying what he had to say to Bob. But, just your last final take on, that whole saga and what you thought.
I think Liam Cohen, that was pretty small energy, honestly. I do believe, Robert Saleh, when he made the comment he did earlier in the week, I think he did genuinely mean it as a compliment. Yeah. He's not the best at giving compliments sometimes. And I think, Liam Cohen being the guy he is, and one thing to kind of note on this, these two were they were both finalists for that Jacksonville Jaguar head coach position right before the season started. And so, maybe there's a little bit of existing blood there of some sort. Maybe it's just kind of brushed under the rug or whatever. But it was interesting to me that, you see Robert Saleh walk up to him. He wants to dap him up. He wants to wish him a good game, because genuinely, like I said, I think he meant it as a compliment. And Liam, he shrugs his shoulder and walks away. And then he walks 20 feet away, lets his big boy get in between him. And he's like, keep my name out your effing mouth. It's so easy to talk from 20 feet away when you got two big boys around you. And I thought it was, a bad look for him. You're a first year head coach. You're off to an incredible start in Jacksonville, a start that they are not privy to. They're not used to having this kind of a start in Jacksonville to a season. So, in a lot of ways, there was a big high road to take here, and Liam did not take that road. So it was interesting to me. I I laughed about it. I didn't really think of anything. I didn't think it meant much. And in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it means much to Liam Cohen. I don't think it means much to Robert Saleh, the 49ers. But, it was interesting to see that whole thing kind of go down.
Definitely. It was mad funny. I thought, listen, like for Liam Cohen, I think it did mean just like a little bit in the sense of he felt like he had something to prove. I don't understand, I guess, if you were stealing signs and yet not that he was or anything like Salah was saying, but like if that's what you were getting called out for and you take offense to that, but then you won, I don't know why you're acting the way you are. You couldn't just been like, being salty about it. It's fine though. I appreciated that Salah tried to take the high road on that one and tried to just go and be polite to him and dap him up, because I saw at the end, like Cohen went up to Shanahan. They, did their thing. It was like nothing had happened. And then he went and got personal, and it was just weird. So like, I know it's young, first year head coach. He won a game that, people probably were doubting him, on the road. It's a good win for them. So, I guess we'll see. But let's pivot on to Thursday night. So Niners, Rams, Thursday night in Levi's South in SoFi Stadium. Do you anticipate another takeover given, like, I get it, but like, given the state of the roster, I don't know how much money I'd want to pay knowing that, 30% of my starters I won't be able to see. So how do you think, have you seen anything, or do you anticipate Niner Nation showing up strong in this one?
Well, I have indeed seen something, and what I saw was 61% of Niners fans are expected to take over SoFi, aka Levi's South, per Vivid seats. So expect a lot of red in that stadium. At this point, I think it's safe to say no matter how bad the 49ers are, their fans are going to show out. And, the faithful are the faithful. They are an incredible fan base, very passionate fan base. But there is something to be said about how much this fan base travels. And, for a trip as close as Los Angeles, 8 hours, 8 to 9 hours down I-5 and just an hour and a half plane ride, it's easy to expect this fan base to show out there. So, 61% is the expectation right now, or the at least what the numbers are saying, suggesting that the 49ers will be ready to take over that stadium. So I'm excited for it, but I'm not necessarily the most excited about this ball game. And so, we kind of talked about it. You broke the news. I know nobody knew this up until now, but Brock Purdy's out of this game. He's got the toe injury. Jennings is injured. He's out for this game. Ricky Pearsall is injured and out for this game. So, Ricky's dealing with the PCL injury. He's also got a bone bruise. And Jennings got an ankle and then that ribs. Something with his ribs there, which he happened on that 2-point conversion, which was great catch, great play, and a great way to get back in the game. But at what cost, right? So we got some injuries, man. And, outside of those guys, Jordan Watkins is dealing with his calf still. He's out of this game. And then D Winters has popped up with this knee injury this week. And that's something that, isn't nothing necessarily. So you got to keep an eye on that. Michael Williams is dealing with a wrist and an oblique. So there's injuries all around. Ronaldo Green's still with that neck injury. Robert Beal Jr., he's still out with his ankle injury. So, dude, up and down the roster, like there's just injuries all over, right? So this ball game, like I said, I'm kind of not expecting a ton, but let's talk about it a little bit, and let's start with the Rams. This Rams team, you know them well now, since the Eagles have played them. Eagles fans know them. That was a hell of a game. That was a fun game. That's two high caliber teams playing at high levels. That Eagles and Rams matchup was, and I think with this Rams team, when we talked about our preseason predictions and we broke down, how we expect each of these divisions to go, and we started talking about this NFC West, I told you I'm not as high on the Rams as essentially everybody else is, but at least the vast majority. And the reason I felt that way was because Matt Stafford has been dealing with that back injury. Past Matt Stafford, their QB depth is sus, right? So for that reason, I'm like, this team isn't going to be that great. They still got Stafford. Stafford's balling. He's taken some hits. Last week in particular, he took a hit and he kind of jarred a little bit, but he's still balling, and he's playing well this season so far. So right now we're catching the Rams at a relatively healthy time. Right now they've got 2 real injuries with questions of if they're going to be playing, and that's Tyler Higbee, their tight end. He's dealing with a hip injury. And Rob Havenstein, their offensive tackle, he's got an ankle injury. So those are the only 2 guys who their game status is kind of up in the air right now. But this game, when you look at the Rams offense, it starts with Stafford. Then you go to your wide receivers. You got Puka Nacua. You got Devontae Adams, right? Then you got Tutu Atwell. Like, that right there, solid. Now you look at their tight end when healthy, it's Higbee. And then you look at their run game with Kyron Williams, and there's just so many ways this team can attack you. They can do it through the air, they can do it on the ground. And last week, without Bosa, this Niners team struggled tremendously on both sides on the ball at one point or another. And specifically that run game. Now, I loved what I saw from Upton Stout last week. That should have been a pick. Should have been on our 10-yard line. There's no way in hell anybody's going to convince me that would be otherwise. That's a ticky-tack call that hardly ever gets called. So that was really frustrating, and I think that took a lot of the wind out of the sails for that game. But he's playing at a high level. Deommodore Lenoir is playing at an extremely high level. So these are 2 guys in your secondary and in your cornerback position that you can rely on to go out there and put their best foot forward when it comes to these receivers for the Rams. Where I'm concerned is actually on this ground game. And I do have concern with these receivers, and I think they're going to have a field day for sure. But, I mean, we talked about Travis Etienne with this Jaguars team last week. We talked about his big playability, talked about how he could be a factor, and he was absolutely a factor versus the Niners. The Niners have a Nick Bosa problem right now. Nick has never been great at stopping run game, but he knows how to set an edge. And the only guy right now that we can really rely on to do that is Michael Williams, who is a rookie. And so he's still learning a lot of this stuff. And I think right now you're seeing this lack of the veteran presence of Nick Bosa on that defensive line really shine through. And you're seeing the inexperience of this defensive line. So I'm concerned that the Rams are going to be able to find their way early on the ground, and then from there just open up their offense.
I think you're probably right, especially on a short week. It favors teams to just lean on their ground game and just keep things simple. And the way the Rams have been running the ball this year, not just with Kyron, but with Blake Corum, the Eagles saw it firsthand. Those guys together have done an incredible job. And, if I could offer a little solace to, potential way that the Niners defense, that in this particular instance is a slightly outmatched compared to what this Rams offense is right now. I think that you guys can still survive if it comes down to just bending but not breaking, which is something the Niners are really good at. I just think that, if you keep Puka, they're going to have Puka just came off of a 170-yard game. He's going to get his. Devontae's got 4 straight touchdowns so far through 4 weeks. They're going to get points. I think it's just a matter of where the Eagles really separated themselves in that Rams game was their ability on money downs to get to Matt Stafford, to make him miss, to be off target. Because I'm watching Matt Stafford play against everyone else, and he's just hitting dots, no looks in Indianapolis, and I'm like, okay, this guy's cooking. Where was this against the Eagles game where it felt like he was a bit off? And it was because the Eagles were disguising things and were able to get him off of his spot. So I think that if the Niners can do that a little bit and Saleh can be creative in trying to generate some pressure on Stafford, that's going to give you guys the best chance to get them off the field on crucial downs. Because Sean McVay has proven that he is not an aggressive coach, and especially in a situation where I think he feels like the Rams are the better team, where he comes in and he's like, my team is significantly better right now. I think he's going to come out with a slightly more conservative game plan, knowing that he can trust his defense because they can. They're a dominant defensive front that's going to have a really, they're going to be going after this Niners offensive line and whoever's back there. And I think McCaffrey's going to have another tough day on the ground, and that's through no fault of his own. And I just think that this game needs to be won on those money downs. So it's going to be very interesting to see. The Rams, like you said, you're catching the Rams at the best time for them. They responded really well from the Eagles lost and beat the Colts, and they could have lost that Colts game too, but things went their way this time, right? So I think that, it's just hard. The odds are stacked against the Niners for sure this week, and it's a product of timing. I think if we're talking about both teams fully healthy, this is a completely different matchup, and that's something that we might get later in the year. But for right now, the Rams get a weakened version of the Niners, and the Niners get the best version of the Rams right now.
Yeah, and that's the tough part too. Is we could play the what ifs scenario all day long here. The realistic part of this is you've got Mac Jones at quarterback now, your wide receiver room, and these are the guys, keep in mind, you're gonna have to bank on to put up essentially around 30 points is my guess in order to compete or win this ball game. You're gonna be relying on essentially, Demarcus Robinson, Sky Moore, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kendrick Bourne. Like, these are the wide receivers that Mac's going to be throwing the football to, and they really haven't gotten a ton of time together. Mac and Kendrick go back to their days in New England together, right? And I think he also had Marquez at one point. Valdez-Scantling. I could be wrong.
I don't think Mac did, no. Or maybe in Jacksonville, but it would have.
I think he did in Jacksonville. Maybe. I don't know. I can't remember. But nonetheless, it's not a ton of time. So there's not a lot of chemistry there. I expect, like every week, Christian McCaffrey is going to be the guy who sees 20,000 targets in this one just to try and get anything going. So this is the team that the 49ers are rolling out to try and compete with a fully loaded Rams team right now that's finding their way. And it's going to be tough, and to kind of build on the defensive discussion for the Rams, the one spot that I can consider them sus at is their cornerback position. But we don't have our starting wide receivers. So it's like, how effective are the 49ers going to be in this game, at really trying to dig into that weakness of the Rams and find the weak spots and exploit those. That's the question, if they can even do that. It's going to be a scheme thing. I'm looking at Robert Saleh. What kind of blitz packages do you have to get some pressure to Matt Stafford? Because I'll tell you one thing, if he has anything close to the time that a guy like Trevor Lawrence had last week, Matty's going to go for a massive game. So the game plan this week has to be more blitz oriented. It's got to be like a mix of blitz packages and something to just kind of spice it up defensively and make Stafford, not necessarily see ghosts, because I don't know how much you can make that guy see ghosts at this point, but make him a little uncomfortable so that it's not just, business as usual moving up and down that field. So I'm curious from that standpoint, what kind of a scheme does Robert Saleh throw? Now, moving to that offensive side again, Kyle Shanahan, what kind of a scheme do you have to generate? Is it just running Christian McCaffrey into a brick wall like every single week? Or are you actually going to, we saw some good things with Mac Jones earlier on in the season. Are we going to see similar things? Are we going to see a 40 pass attempt game from Mac? I expect so, because at this point, your offensive line isn't good enough to run behind, and teams are already selling out to stop that run game. So you're forced to throw the football. So it's going to be interesting to see how the 49ers attack this game. I'm going to get into the keys here, and then we'll wrap it up for the 49ers. So key number one, you need to dial up a quick play scheme offensively. I just kind of talked about it a little bit. You need to get the ball out quick on this one and limit the pass rush potential of this Rams defense. The Rams, they've got Jared Verse, who's a monster on the edge. They got Braden Fisk, Byron Young, who right now is tied for the lead in sacks this season at 5. So this defense has got players all up and down it. They're a top 10, could be top 3 actually. And in Mac's eyes, I think Mac even said he was one of the best defenses in his opinion right now. So this is a really good defense. You need to be able to draw up a scheme that works well against this pass rush, because you You just can't hang in the pocket the way that Mac was in the 2 weeks he was playing quarterback. So that's my first key. Second key is San Francisco D-line needs to actually do something. It's tough, right? You don't have Nick Bosa. He's a generational talent. You know that without him, things are going to look different. Last week was really bad. I mean, hardly any pressures, 0 sacks. Trevor was very clean after that game was over. Like the most dirtied up he was after Fred Warner had that dirty play at the end of the game to try and knock the ball out, right? So you need to try and dial something up defensively on that D-line. You know, you got to make Staffy feel that presence, that defensive presence. Otherwise, he's just going to sit back there and sling it. My last one, limit those self-inflicted wounds. You know, we saw it last week. There is hardly any room for error versus the Rams this week. You got to limit the penalties, take advantage of the opportunities. You almost need to eliminate any turnovers versus the Rams if they want a chance to win. So, and that includes special teams as well. Special teams is, once again, concerning when it comes to stopping those returns. And it's tough because even on kickoff returns for them, you don't expect them to house it, and you don't expect them to go long with Sky Moore back there. So special teams needs to be on their game. Defense needs to be on their game. Offense needs to be on their game. Everybody needs to be as locked in as you can possibly be for this one. And that's a lot to ask. And even then it might not be enough, but I am a 49er faithful and I love the 49ers. Always will. But I just can't pick the 49ers in this game to win right now. So I'm going to take the Rams. I'm not going to say it's a blowout because I have a little bit of respect for my team, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a blowout. I've got this being a higher scoring game, and I've got the Niners figuring out a way to kind of punch some points in. I've got 27-21, and them covering a 7.5 point spread right now. But, a loss as Levi South.
Yeah. So, the honesty, the awareness is important. You can't be delusional. Like some fans like to be and pick your team every week, which is fair. Totally valid. And I know if the circumstances were different, it'd be a completely different conversation, right? And that's a great point that you made regarding the special teams for the Rams. The Rams have been one of the best on the kickoff defense because of the way that they've done things. We figured that out. The Eagles figured that out the hard way, and that's going to be something that the Niners are going to have to get through too, because the Rams are the second best team or the best. They're right there with the Panthers in terms of this stat of where the opposing team starts their each offensive possession off of those kickoffs. And so the Rams and the Panthers are averaging around the 22-yard line, but then the next closest team after that is at like the 28, 29. So that's like a significant difference that you're seeing on just the kickoff. And that alone makes a huge difference on a drive-to-drive basis. We saw that with the Eagles when they played the Rams. They were starting behind their own 15-yard line more than 3 times in that game. The Niners are going to be forced to go up and down the field, 80-plus yards consistently. It's going to be tough. And they are going to try and tee off on Mac. And it's just going to make life really, really hard on a drive-to-drive thing. And that does make me a little nervous with Sky Moore's, he's been great so far, but he has had kind of a checkered past with, those kind of things. And it's not going to be his fault this weekend, on tomorrow, because it's going to be the way this kicker is. Hardy, I think is the guy's name, if I remember correctly. He's just kind of got it mastered, and he knows exactly how to get that ball to go wherever he wants. So that's going to be something I'm going to be paying attention to, because it's something that the Eagles tried to do last week, and I think that's a way that teams can manipulate this new kickoff rule. So just a little sidebar there for you Niners fans to look out for. As a score, this is one of the few times where I will also be picking against the Niners. Last year, I was pretty consistent. I've always believed in y'all. I always wanted to being optimistic. But this time, the Rams are just cooking. They are, I think they're a really great team. I think they're definitely one of those contenders in the NFC. Like you had mentioned, I wasn't sure what Matt Stafford's health was going to be, but he's out there and he's doing his thing. So it's going to be tough. I don't see the Niners covering in this one. It's going to be at home on the road, but I think it's going to be 30-21 LA. So it's going to be tough, but I think that, the Niners, will give them a fighting chance, but I think it's unless, like you said, unless they play perfect and unless they can force the Rams into mistakes, which I don't know if that can happen. And if the Niners will have to play perfect to pull this one out. So our last little bit on the Rams, on the Niners, sorry, before we move on here to the Eagles. Since we have finished the first month of the season, we thought it would be good to have a quarterly grade for both of our teams. But we've been talking about the Niners, so Ben's going to finish off this conversation with his grade for the first month of the Niners season through the first 4 games. And the Niners are 3-1 in a very interesting fashion. So Ben, take it away. What is your grade for the Niners through the first quarter of the season?
No, that was exactly it. It's an interesting fashion. This 49ers team has found ways to win ball games that they otherwise wouldn't last year. And considering all the injuries going into the season, during the season, the constant changeover from week to week and the constant having to shift, not knowing who's going to play what position, even at the quarterback position, this 49ers team has found a way to win. And being 3-1 at this point, I think is about as good as you can ask for. So I'm going to give them an A-, but this next quarter here, leading up to the halfway point of the season, is going to tell us everything we need to know about this 49ers team and really, truly how gritty this team really is. Because, while it's been gritty and it's been, an identity building 4 weeks for the Niners, this next 4 to 5 weeks are going to be even more interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that's a totally fair grade. I think given everything, you guys have faced a lot of adversity already, and this was like the most ideal start for you guys given everything that's happening. You guys, we talked about how light, coming into the season the schedule was supposed to be. And now you guys are facing this stretch like we've just been talking about. Like that's going to be a little bit more difficult. And the fact that you guys got through a part of your schedule where, if you guys had started 1-3 going into this stretch, we'd be talking about the season, the outcome, how it might look totally differently. So, yeah, no, that's a great grade for the San Francisco 49ers. I would be right there with you in terms of just how they've kind of exceeded expectations given the stuff that's happened around them. All right, so let's pivot on over to the Philadelphia Eagles. Probably the most hilarious team in the NFL right now, dude. Like controversy of random sorts. Always, even when we're 4-0, beating good teams. Obviously, I addressed it on my post-game pod. It's in our feed. Please check it out if you haven't already. The A.J. Brown, tweets, he cleared that up today. So business as usual back to the Eagles. But I want to get your take just kind of on that Bucs game. Again, another tale of two halves. So what did you think? What were your main takeaways from the Eagles-Bucs game?
So the game was interesting. The way it started was very similar to how the last game ended in a lot of ways, with that blocked punt return for a touchdown, and none other than Cam, of course, making that play. So you're welcome for that. It was an electric start for the Eagles, and I was like, wow, they're, really taking control of this game, and things are looking good offensively, defensively, definitely special teams. But then halftime rolls around, and the reverse happens of what happened versus the Rams. And it was like the offense just came to a screeching halt in a lot of ways. And like defense did their job, gave you guys really good, field positions and things like that at times. But it was, at least in the first half, in the second half, like trying to stop the Bucs with all that momentum that they came out of halftime with. After that, what was it, a 58-yard, 65-yard freaking field goal? Like it was impressive, right? So the part of it that bugs me is the same questions that were kind of there before this game are now even more there, now. And those all have to do with the offense. And it's frustrating because you have a top 5 when he's being utilized properly, wide receiver in A.J. Brown. You have what should be top 10 receiver in Devontae Smith when he's being utilized. And both of these guys in the second half were not utilized much at all. And Devontae's running the same route like 11 times. And it's just the same stale plays for the Eagles at times. And it's similar like with Christian McCaffrey. Like, it's just dump the ball off to Saquon and let him go make plays, which I get. He's elite. But it's stale right now. And you've got, this guy in Drew Brees. I don't know who he is. I've never heard his name before. He's coming out here, talking crap about the Eagles and how they're operating. He doesn't like how they're doing things. So it's interesting. There's a lot of questions with this team, but you guys are 4-0, so there shouldn't be this many questions. But nonetheless, you guys got the win.
Yeah, and I think that's the part we really want to pay attention to, right? I think everyone's saying, "Oh, you're 4-0, but you're not winning impressively. Yeah, you guys should have lost this. What if this? What if that?" And the Eagles are, one of the rare teams that cannot complete a pass in the second half of a game and still somehow win. And I think it's weird because this team, and again, to address the whole AJ of it all, AJ came out today. They had their meetings with the press this week for the local guys, and AJ immediately once they got to him, he started the conversation by saying, I take accountability for the tweet that I posted. I let my frustrations get the best of me. It wasn't towards anybody in the organization. Not sure how true that is, but he's like, I stay in constant communication with Sirianni, with Kevin Patullo, with Hurts. Like, it has nothing to do with like the guys here. I care about winning. And winning more, like first and foremost. And again, I'm kind of paraphrasing here. I'm not going exactly word for word, but he talked for about 5 minutes. And the reporters asked him a couple questions about it too, just follow-up questions. And one thing I do appreciate about AJ is he is very insightful when he actually is kind of discussing things. He's open about it. I wish some of that would be kept more in-house, but at the end of the day, he took accountability for it, and, he's a fierce competitor that wants to be involved. He said when the offense is stale, when it's not going the way we want it to, I want to be a part of that. I believe I'm a good enough player to, make a difference. And I don't blame him for feeling that way and wanting to be more, to make more of an impact. But the thing is, it's hard. What was frustrating was you're creating this kind of controversy, this discussion when you're winning. So it's like last year you're doing weird stuff in the playoffs with the books. And like, again, you were already winning at that point too. So it's like weird timing for him. For those who are like, oh, he didn't, he knows what he's doing. He's a wide receiver who's aware. He called himself the meme king. Like he has stuff prepared. He knows what he's doing. And I think he's, again, the way he took accountability early was the part that kind of diffused everything. And I think what he had to say was, I kind of take that at face value because this is just kind of the adventure of AJ Brown that we've been getting. I was frustrated at the time. I wasn't sure what to interpret it as. But that's kind of all squared away. In terms of the offense in general, I think what we're really noticing that hasn't been talked about enough, and I think it's now starting to make the rounds with the national media, is that the Eagles' offensive line is not playing to the level that everyone always just assumes has been associated with these Eagles' offensive line the past few years. When I hear some people talk about it, they're like, oh, the Eagles, why isn't this offense going? The Eagles have this great offensive line. It's like the first thing they start with. And I think this year that just hasn't been the case because not for any lack of skill, but I think because the guys are hurt this year. We talked about, Dickerson had a massive injury going into the season where we thought he was going to miss a couple weeks, but he ends up being ready for week one and playing in week one. And Lane Johnson's been dealing with stinger after stinger where he's stepping out, for a portion of the game, every game, if not missing, the majority of the game. Jordan Mailata has stayed consistent, but he was hurt towards the end of training camp. Cam Jurgens has he even fully recovered from the back injury he suffered and played through last year. And Tyler Steen is just, he's a replacement level player who's coming in from Mackay. And the numbers will back this up that the Eagles offensive line does not have the same level of impact on a down-to-down basis. They're not nowhere near successful in their run blocking as they were before. Their pass blocking, they're fine, but the interior, Cam and Landon, have been suffering. And that can't be ignored. I think it was like, oh, what's happening with this with this offense? Why is Saquon getting stopped, 1.5 yards before contact when last year he was averaging 4.5 yards before he was even getting touched? So it's like I think that's a huge part of it. Jalen takes a couple sacks a game, but I think he's been navigating the pocket and navigating pressure really well. And the blitz hasn't been that much of an issue for him this year. So, I think the Eagles are getting by off of the fact that they're just not right now. They are not at 100%, and things aren't operating smoothly because the offensive line isn't dictating the course of the game the way it has been the past couple years. And I think that we're seeing that kind of play true. And so, yes, the Eagles have this offensive line issue. Yes, the Eagles' play calling is weird and inconsistent, and you're seeing them throw the ball 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage to Saquon. And I'm like, what are we doing here when, we're doing weird stuff and there's no creativity. Our defense has been good, but hurt in some parts. Jalen Carter's playing hurt. We have a lot of moving parts and pieces. But the defense has played pretty well, and special teams obviously being the outlier this year, especially on the defensive side of things, getting the blocked kicks and the blocked field goals. So, those things have gone our way. So the Eagles have all this kind of, all these questions, and yet they've played the Cowboys, the Chiefs on the road, the Rams, who are a contender, and the Bucs, who everyone thought was a contender, but obviously the Bucs were a little depleted in this game, so I do give them that kind of benefit of the doubt, but it's still a competitive team. So the Eagles have played 4 super tough teams to start the year, have won in completely different ways, won in ways that they shouldn't have, and they're 4-0 with all these questions. So it just makes me wonder, what is it about this team that when everyone talks about them and, on social media and everyone wants to bring up, Jalen stats and everything like that this year, for all the fantasy owners out there who have the Eagles, any player on the Eagles offense on their team, wondering what the hell is going on over here, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. They're winning 20 out of 21 games. They're doing weird stuff. They're winning with wacky plays. People want to say referees are helping them out. I disagree. I think that it's, I think when you talk about the Eagles defense, they're one of the most penalized defenses in the NFL. So I don't want to hear, yes, Quinn, there was definitely a few blatant missed calls that were missed, but there was definitely been plenty that were called on us that were bullcrap too. So it's I don't want to hear, they get helped on the tush push, all this stuff. They didn't even run the official tush push last week. They ran fake stuff out of it, which is, another scary wrinkle that people have to think about now. So it's this team, I don't know what it is. I think I don't know if it's as simple as just Patullo get more creative, try to find, is it going to be as simple as finding ways to get A.J. Brown open instead of running the same 6 routes concepts every single game? I don't know. And I don't know if this O-line is going to be able to continue. I don't know what what the rushing offense is going to look like. Jalen Hurts has been the most effective runner on this team. And it's so weird to me. The Eagles will win off of defense and special teams this year. And AJ even said it in his interview too. He's like, the defense and special teams are carrying us right now. And I do think that this Eagles offense really needs to, they really do need to spend these next few weeks, like I mentioned in my postgame, picking it up, trying different things. You're 4-0 against really tough teams. Now is kind of the lighter part of your schedule. Maybe not this weekend. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but you got the Giants, Vikings, Giants coming up after this week. Why not try a few things? Why not try and see, you're not going to win 17 games, I don't think. I mean, you have won 20 games in a row now, but none of the Eagles fans out there expect you guys to win all 17 regular season games this year. So try some things. I don't care if we lose and there's some potential in the offense. So I just want to see something. So that's just kind of where I'm at with this offense right now. It's just it's inconsistent, and that's been kind of the theme for the first quarter of the year.
So I'm seeing, I want to bring this, and I want to get your point of view here and see if you agree. I'm seeing a lot of similarities between this year's Eagles team and the same Eagles team of 2023 pre-collapse. And what I'm talking about is, you can do this what if thing all the time about what if this guy doesn't drop it? What if this play doesn't happen? What if this kick isn't blocked? What if, there were so many what ifs in 2023 when you guys were 10-0 right before playing the 49ers. God, that game felt so good. And then the collapse started happening, and these things that were working before were not working. And I get a similar vibe from this team right now than I did when watching that 2023 team. And I want to know if you get the same vibes or if you feel differently.
I would say I feel slightly different. Now, to your credit, to your point, it's not nothing. I don't think that Jordan Mailata referenced this earlier in the year. I forget after which week it was. I want to say it was after week 2, close to when they almost when it was a close game with the Chiefs. Jordan said that there is that fear in the back of their minds of what happens if they lose. That they're afraid of the potential of that happening again. So it is something that, like, when we talk about, that year in the collapse, it's still, even though after this team won the Super Bowl and everything and fought those demons, it's still lurking in the back of their minds because, this city, the way Philadelphia is as a sports town and everything like that, is just immense pressure. The standards are at a much higher rate than some of these other markets that we talk about and discuss in terms of like the seriousness they take this team. Like, if we lose, we could lose a really close, tough game, and everyone's going to be calling for Sirianni's job. It doesn't matter even. So it's like, it's going to be, that's the pressure that the Eagles have to play with each and every week. So there is that sense of like every loss feels like we're walking on eggshells at that point. Like, oh man, what happens if we lose 2 in a row? Oh crap, are we going to lose 6, like the 6 of our last 7? But I think where I would offer why it's different was that year, our defense was old, slow. We were not sure with our defensive coordinator. He was a Vic Fangio descendant, but not Vic Fangio, who had no answers, to the point where we had to switch to Matt Patricia mid-season. The roster was not the same. I know that's kind of a cop-out answer that, like, oh, it's not the same team type of thing that, I like messing with people about. But I think that when we look at this defense that we're talking about this year, and not even this year, but last year, the way that those remnants of 2024 are showing in the way that the Eagles defense has been successful so far this year. Now, the raw numbers, if we look at like points per game allowed, like yards and stuff like that allowed for the defense, it's not going to say, hey, we're a top 5 defense. Right now, we're middle of the pack in those stats. But the stats that have mattered for our defense, we've been taking the ball away a ton. We've been stopping teams on 3rd down when it matters and forcing them to punt the ball on 4th down and stuff. So, and we're surrounded by young guys who are extremely quick, fast to the ball, and they tackle. Quinyon Mitchell's making tackles. Cooper DeJean's laying guys out. Zach Bond, Jahad Campbell. Like, when your edges are completely covered the way that these guys can do, it really does change how some offenses like to do things. Like the Buccaneers thought that some of those flats that they had that are normally available to them were available, and then you just see Reed coming down super hot. Friggin' Cooper DeJean just flattening the dude. Quinyon, like, everyone was like, that's the Eagles defense. Yeah. So I think that has been the most sustainable piece, and that's something that will continue to be sustainable, especially as these young guys continue to develop. Now, the Eagles have been suffering some injuries there on the defensive front. They've been losing a lot of their defensive edge depth, so that's being tested. But I think that's where I sense the difference. Not to mention that this team going through that collapse, I think I think the Eagles team, if I want to compare them to like a superhero of sorts, I would compare them to like Iron Man, in the sense where like he is a character that is always, when he makes a mistake in one movie or one, you'll see him in the next movie say, here's my counter for this. And the Eagles, through that collapse have learned when to adjust and how to adjust. Now, we may not be seeing that on a week-to-week basis. And that's also the other thing I'm nervous about too through these next few weeks is the Eagles last year, we saw that change happen during the bye week. Now, I really wonder if the Eagles are going to try and just coast to the bye week with things kind of status quo and try to keep winning this way the next 4 weeks till we get to the bye week. Then they can reevaluate and do what they like to do and come out in the second half swinging. But I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be as simple as that. But I don't anticipate a collapse if they do lose, or even if they lose like back-to-back games, because the schedule is going to get harder. This is the lightest. These last 4 games are the lightest part. But the fact that we got through the first part 4-0 gives us so much room for error. And again, we've been getting everyone's best punch, and we've been playing not well. We haven't been playing great, and we're still finding ways to win. So I just think that like there's a different level to this team that they were back when they were in 2023 in the collapse. They were kind of escaping by the skin of their teeth each and every, heroic comeback that Jalen Hurts led that year. But we get to lean on our defense in a way that we didn't back then. So that's kind of where I sit and why it might be a little bit different this time around.
I think you're getting close to everyone's best punch. It's as best that they can do with the personnel they have. And, that's not to like say anything you said was wrong there. It's mainly that, Devontae Adams in the Rams game, he has a hammy flare up during the game. And he continued playing the rest of the game, but he was short on routes. He wasn't as effective as he was early on. This game against the Buccaneers, didn't have Mike Evans. That's a massive piece that's missing. But yes, I agree in terms of what do you like if you have all these ingredients in a pot and you're just going to throw it at a wall and see what sticks. They're throwing every single thing they have at the Eagles because it's the defending champs. You're going to have a target on your back in every single game. Everyone is going to want to play the best game that they possibly can, and they're going to prepare probably the hardest that they have, up until that point, and maybe even harder, until the playoffs hit when it comes to this game against the Eagles. So I think you're seeing the better, shot of teams here. It's the offense just worries me a bit because I want to see more from this offense. I know what it's capable of. We've seen the little spurts from, everybody in this offense already this year. We just haven't seen it. It feels like we haven't seen it all happen at once. And until that happens, I think it's just going to draw all these questions. Like, you guys could be 16-0, but if you're averaging 230 yards a game and, Jalen isn't making these incredible plays and AJ isn't a top 5 receiver, everyone's going to be questioning how effective you're going to be when the playoffs start.
And I think that's totally fair. And I think that, I guess my only rebuttal to that would be, I think the way teams have been talking about the Eagles after facing them this year have been very I hate the Eagles, man. They got away with it. Oh man, we could have beat them here. This and this happened. You see it with Chris Jones, you saw it with Kyren Williams, and Baker, got to point. He didn't say that he hates the Eagles or anything, but he mentioned, you just can't start slow. We can't start the way that we did. That the Eagles have turned into this team that they're not going to play their best ball each and every week, and that infuriates teams because these teams that should be good enough to beat them are not beating them when they should be. Multiple times. The Rams have had 3 chances to give us their best, and it hasn't worked out. So I just think that it's a weird spot to be in, and the Eagles beating the Bucs was huge. So I think that it's just a weird spot to be in. But I think, it'll be interesting to see when that loss does happen, how this team responds depending on how they lose. It's going to happen at some point. It might even happen this week. We're about to talk about it, but I just think that it's going to be, I'm not worried if they do. They went, they've earned enough. They're having this kind of historic run. I don't think we've ever really seen a team have this level of success in this kind of a stretch the way the Eagles have. Even if it hasn't led to multiple Super Bowls, who knows? But the way the Eagles are winning, I don't think they can get to the Super Bowl playing this exact way. If you're telling this game, these games that they've been playing have a playoff feel to them, clunky, big plays here and there, but it's you have to work for everything on both sides of the ball. And I just think that the Eagles are built for playoff football, and they're ready. And so I trust them now more than any other team just because of the way that they're built and the way that they're coached. I'm no longer concerned with how Nick Sirianni runs this team in terms of his game management. He, yes, he'll make a questionable call here and there, but I never doubt that he doesn't believe in his own guys the way that some of these other coaches with, if Sean McVay, I just that's the part, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, some of their, conservative nature at times on plays where I'm just if you guys are these genius master play callers, if you guys had the Eagles offense, you wouldn't be settling. You'd be going for it every 4th down you got. So I just think it's an interesting spot that the Eagles are in. The offense cannot play this way if we want to win the Super Bowl again. We need the Eagles offense that dropped 55 on Washington, that was able to drop 40 on, obviously that was aided by the defense too, but we're able to put up those numbers. The Eagles are the 30th, ranked offense in terms of yards passing yards, total yards, rushing yards, like all that stuff. We're literally bottom 3, and yet we're 7th in points per game. And that comes from winning inside the margins, getting the turnovers to shorten the field so then we can score, or getting those blocked, like block punts or block field goals. So it's just a weird team. The Eagles are a weird team. So let's move on to this matchup on Sunday against the Denver Broncos. So the Denver Broncos came off of they dominated the Burrowless Bengals 28-3 on Monday night. So they are coming off a short rest, having to fly across the country on the road to play the Eagles. This is I don't know how to describe this Broncos team, because I don't want to say that they're bad, because they were a couple what if situations away from being 4-0. Like, they were close to beating the Chargers, and they kind of got screwed in that Colts game with that lame call at the very, very end. And I just think that this is this was a bad time for the AJ Brown comments this weekend, because this isn't going to be the team that I think is going to be, here comes the big AJ Brown breakout game, when you got Pat Surtain the second on the other side, going to be shadowing him all game. This is going to be a big Devontae Smith game. Last time the Eagles played the Broncos, we don't play them that often. So last time the Eagles played the Broncos was in 2021, Jalen's first year as a starter. Devontae cooked Surtain on Devontae's birthday. It was a great game. Devontae had 2 touchdowns. It was a great time. The Eagles won that game on the road in Denver. I think the Eagles, against this defense, this Broncos defense was, we talked about it. I think everyone talked about them going into the preseason. They were everyone's preseason favorite for best defense. They haven't really, statistically, have not lived up to that billing. Obviously, last week is going to help when they play Jake Browning and they only allow 3 points. Like, that's going to skew their numbers a little bit. But I do think what makes this defense go is that defensive front. Those guys are unbelievable. Nick Bonito, Zach Allen, I forget, Franklin Myers. They got a lot of guys there who can get to the quarterback. And against this kind of battered Eagles offensive line, I'm a little nervous. But were the Broncos, were their defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph, the way he likes to play is a lot of man, and he does like to blitz. He was 6th highest in the blitz rate, and he's 6th highest in man coverage. So that favors the Eagles, but that doesn't mean that they're going to run that, right? Todd Bowles and the Bucks came out blitz heavy, man heavy, and the Eagles cooked them. And I think that if I'm the Broncos and I see that, I'm like, why don't we just play zone against Jalen Hurts and just dare him to beat us in these, we'll drop 8 guys back and see if he can fit it in a tight window, because they're probably going to run the same route concepts again. So I think, like, this is going to be, that is just, if you're the team going up against the Eagles. The Cowboys did that approach in week 1, and they were very close. Obviously, Jalen had a good game, but he made something out of nothing in that game. But AJ said it. He's like, they played zone all game. Like, there wasn't really anywhere for us to go to. So if I'm the Broncos, you can get home on this Eagles team with your top rushers that you have coming at the Eagles. If I'm Vance Joseph, if I'm the Broncos, I am daring the Eagles to throw the ball on me, because you'll be able to stop the run, because the offense, it's just not as effective. It's just not the same. So they can do that, but, how it'll actually turn out, I think, the Eagles still have the advantage. I think the Eagles will come out with a game plan. They will be prepared, and if they get hit in the mouth, they will adjust. That's just how it works. I think the Eagles have, I don't know how to describe it. They come out with one punch and have one counter per game, and that counter will give them 2 touchdowns, and that one punch will give them another, and then that's enough to win them the game. And that's just how it is. But, like, you saw what happened in that Bucs game. You saw what happened in the first half of that Rams game. If they don't have an answer, it's gonna look that way for probably the rest of that half until they figure something out. So it's gonna be, this game has a lot of variance, just because the Broncos looked awesome against the Bengals. So it's like they were running all over the place. Their passing offense was working like a dream, but the Bengals defense sucks. So it's like, how much do I want to take into that? They've been a good scoring offense this year. Bo's been inconsistent. He will put the ball in harm's way. So I believe there's going to be an opportunity in this game. So if I talk about the keys to this game, The keys that I'm looking out for is this Eagles offensive line against the defensive line, like I had mentioned, because there's no longer the strength of the Eagles offense, and I think it's a big reason why the Eagles offense is suffering. If those pass rushers create issues, just if they're only rushing 4, let alone if they get home on blitzes and stuff. Because I'm not as worried with Jalen Hurts with the blitz. He's proven now that he kind of has those answers with with more experience that he's gained. But that's going to be the main matchup that can make the difference in this game, especially from that side of the ball. On the other side of the ball, I really liked what I saw from Keely Ringo last week. The defense, the corner position felt a little bit more stable, having that kind of size and athleticism on that side. When we look at the injury report, Adoree Jackson was limited. He didn't play last week, so he was limited with a groin, so he's practicing. So will we see kind of a mixture of the two? I'm not sure. Will Fangio just roll with Ringo since he's healthy and played decent? We'll see. But Jalen Carter was limited with a shoulder injury that's probably going to be a thing all year. And that's, I don't know how I feel about that. But there is a difference when he's not playing, but he's still not 100%, and you can see that impact. So we're really only getting 70% of Jalen Carter's impact right now, and that has taken a toll, especially on the pressure we're able to get and our ability to stop the run. Lane Johnson was limited as well with the shoulder, but he also has a neck, and he also, he's been lingering. He'll probably start. Hopefully he can finish. I don't know if that's going to, work out. Dallas Goedert was not participating with a knee injury today. I don't know if he's going to be missing this game. There is a chance that he'll miss this game. It could just be rest, though, because it's early in the week. But, this defensive, this front seven with, Jahad Campbell and Zach Bond playing extremely well. I just, I hope that we can keep this Broncos offense in front of us, because they definitely like to make big plays. They definitely like to attack the middle of the field. They have weapons they can go to with Troy Franklin, Cortland Sutton. Nix has trust in these guys. So I know he's going to grip it and rip it, and he's also a threat with his legs. But I anticipate Bo, because he's going to be taking chances, I believe with that there's going to be chances for the Eagles defense to capitalize. I anticipate an interception in this game. I don't know about a fumble. The Eagles have kind of been getting away with some of these fumbles. That one last week on Bucky was literally as close as you could possibly get. I thought in the moment, just, full clarity, I thought it was theirs. I thought it was he was down by contact. Guess not. So whatever, we'll take that. But I think there'll be an opportunity. I think Bo will throw an interception in this game to who I'm not sure. Maybe Quinyon, maybe Cooper, depending on, which direction it goes to. I'm interested to see what the Broncos do, because the Buccaneers decided to target Quinyon Mitchell all last game, and that was a dumb decision by them to take as many shots as Quinyon as it did. He played an amazing game. So I think the Broncos, if you're going to try, pick on Keely, that's going to be your chance. So Keely, you're not going to be matched up on Cortland. I anticipate Quinyon shadowing him for the most part in this game. But it's going to be, will they expose Keely Ringo? Will they expose our CB2? And will Bo Nix have a clean pocket? That's going to be a huge thing if this defensive line can just muddy it up or get a blitz. Vic Fangio has switched up his method. Last year, hardly blitzed. This year, he's blitzing at an above average rate. So I think it's a product of the personnel he has, and it is kind of the fact that, our defensive line isn't healthy and can't generate the same level of pressure with Jalen Carter playing at 70%. So that's just kind of where I'm sitting. I think the Eagles, offensively, I don't know how. I'm nervous to see how they get going. I just hope that they can put together a few consistent drives and just escape this one, because this is a good defensive team. This is a good team in general. This is going to be the best team they face until the bye week. So this is, the last, real chance. And the Broncos are going to be desperate because they're 2-2. They're trying to hang in there in the AFC West. Not that if they lose this game that they're completely out of the picture, but they don't want to fall any more behind when they're, when the Chargers are all of a sudden looking weak and the Chiefs maybe just bounce back a little bit. So we'll see. They don't want to fall too far behind. We're going to get their best punch because they're healthy. When I look at their injury report, they said they only had 2 guys on there, and that was Nate Atkins, their tight end, who has a concussion, and outside linebacker Jonah Ellis with a thumb was limited, and Marvin Mims with his hip, and I said ankle, was limited. Same with Nick Bonito with his wrist, and former Eagles linebacker Alex Singleton with his thumb, but they both fully practiced. So the only guy who was out was that Nate Atkins with a concussion. So it's they're going to be in here pretty healthy. So we're getting their best punch, and, I'm just interested to see. Sean Payton's a good coach. I gained more respect for him this week because he talked about the tush push in a very positive light and gave it the respect it deserves. So, that automatically gives me brownie points for, guys who I didn't really respect before. But no, I think it's going to be a good game. I think, the Eagles get the 10 a.m. So it's going to be a 10 a.m. game, for us. So 1 p.m. down there in Philadelphia. I don't think weather's going to play an issue. Thank goodness. It's going to be, hopefully a good day down there. But I anticipate the Eagles, I believe, I forget if we were 3.5. I think we were 3.5 point favorites in this game. I think the Eagles will cover. I don't think this will be a statement game by any means, but there is a chance that the Eagles could be up big in this game, kind of like they have been in some of these other games, or have a big half, and and might, fizzle out. So, we'll see, but I anticipate the Eagles winning this game. I think it's going to be 31-23 Philadelphia.
I got Eagles 28-24. I think it'll be a close game, but yeah, I mean, this Eagles team, they've got what it takes. To your point of the Broncos being pretty healthy, the only thing is, you talked about their defense being a little bit down. They've got 7 guys on IR, 5 of which are defensive players. One of them is my boy Dre Greenlaw. So that's all.
No, that's a great point. That's true. On this injury report, it didn't put the IR guys on there. That's a great point. I do think, though, another point, last thing, where the Broncos could really get us is J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey they've been running the ball very well. And I think I would be shocked if we don't see them try early to attack this Eagles offense on the ground to establish and help Bo Nix. Because Bo Nix threw the ball 40 times against the Bengals. He was just cooking. But they were running the ball really well, too. And J.K.'s been averaging like 6 yards a carry this year. He's popping off again. So he's having great success behind that O-line. So it's going to be, touch and go here. I think the Eagles come out on top. If they do, I don't see any reason why they can't be 8-0 going into the bye week. That's just kind of how I feel, because if they can't lose to this team, I don't know who the hell's going to be able to beat them. So that's going to be the tough question going into this week. But Broncos are getting that one day, less rest, flying across the country. We'll see if that does anything. But I think it'll be an Eagles win. And, if we're talking about this team being 5-0, despite this weird start, I'll take it. So when I'm going to quickly, because we definitely been spending a lot of time on the Eagles here. I think that when I give them my quarter, my grade for the first quarter of the year, it's been I would give them a C+. You're the reigning Super Bowl champions. You have been underperforming by not just, the national standard, but your own standard. I think, I don't think anyone in that offense is happy with how things are going. I think the defense has been a pleasant surprise, except for what the numbers might tell you. I think the defense has performed exceptionally well, and the special teams has stepped up and has mitigated a lot of the issues that the offense has had. I think that if the Eagles can figure this out on offense, they're going to be the most unstoppable team in the league. But until they do that, and they've been playing C+ football, and they're still 4-0, so I give them credit too. I think if they were 2-2, we're talking about oh man, this is like a C-, D scenario because of what the hell's going on. But you're 4-0, it's hard to go any lower than that. But I think a C+ is where I'm sitting with the Eagles through the first quarter of the year.
I think that's respectable. I think I would put them at the same rating.
And I think, so I think that it'll be, that's the thing though. There's room for improvement, and that's the part where that's the hope that in these next few weeks that the Eagles can wake up a little bit. That's the giant that's sleeping. So with that being said, guys, I think that's going to be it for this episode. Stay tuned these next few weeks as we are entering, now that it is October, NBA preseason's coming along. It is time for NBA basketball and talk about how awesome the Sacramento Kings are going to be this year, guys. Don't you worry. We're going to get back on that hype train this year. Just wait and see. But with that being said, guys, this was episode 106 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social medias that are located up above. For all you video watchers out there, for all you audio listeners out there, the links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, follow the show. We appreciate all the love and support that we have. We've added plenty of new members to this family, this BTB family, and we appreciate all the growth that we've been having bit by bit with you guys. Thank you so much for all the love and support. We really do appreciate it. For all you Eagles fans out there, will the Eagles be able to defeat the Broncos? For all you Niners fans, how worried about are you? Because this game's going to be happening today. Let us know. You guys think that Mac Jones will be able to pull something out of his hat and Kyle Shanahan lead this team to a win? We'll see. Well, with that being said, guys, I am Marcos Conagron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet Reds.
all right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace.